Well, hello. You guys are here with me again. It's nice to see you. I wasn't expecting visitors tonight, but it's nice to see that you're here with me. I'm just a good old country folk, looking to bring a little light into this world. Okay, well, maybe none of that describes me. I knew you were going to be here because my live stream just went live. And hey, how are you guys doing? Good evening. Welcome on in. Glad to have you guys here. Forgive me while I stir my hot cocoa that I made because, now that it's, I don't know, hit 70 degrees here today, seems like a good time for hot cocoa. Because why not, right? Uh, hello, Tellafrog. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, our humble author is here on the YouTube channel. If you have questions, comments, no concerns, we don't want to hear those. Only good feedback. Um, but glad to have you here. Thank you so much for coming in to join in with us this evening. It's always much more meaningful for the audience if the author is here for them. And hey, it means a lot to me too. So I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your letting me share this book with the world. And a reminder to everybody out there, I am reading Tellafrog, Book 1. There is a Book 2, as well as eventually a Book 3 and a Book 4, which means you may get a little taste here, but there's a lot more to come. But of course, as he says, any feedback is good feedback. And I do wholeheartedly agree with that. Good, bad, indifferent. What did you like? What did you not like? All very valid parts of feedback. All of it helps to make a writer a better writer, a narrator a better narrator. And overall, we get better at our craft because people are willing to tell us not just what they like, but what they don't like. So let's talk a little bit about what we learned in Book 1. Book 1, how about the prologue in chapters 1 and 2? We're starting into chapter 3 tonight when we do get started. So just as a quick recap, our main character, Relanu Tellafrog, was in Austria doing some research around a lake, looking for the magical properties in common items that only the magical community can use. Unfortunately, we learned in chapter 1 that our main character was, shall we call it, in an accident when he was young. A ship that he was sailing upon was being attacked by another ship. Bear in mind, this takes place in the 1800s. His father grabbed him. They went up into the clouds. He was struck by lightning and fell off the broom. They encountered a dragon up in the clouds. His father clearly saved him because, well, he's telling the story. But as a side effect, he lost his ability to use magic. He can still interact with some magical items, but he cannot use magic. The magic that was inherent in him is no longer available for use. Hello, Andy Norman. Good evening. So, he's doing research and gets news that his father has come down ill. And he is contacted by some, well, let's just say it, some high pass along this message. So he packs up his research material. He goes and he meets up with that high muckety-muck friend, who is, I want to say, the Imperial Council. And, an old friend of his also had an incident where he lost most of his magic, has a little bit more, but lost a lot of it. And so has been helping to fund the research for Raylanu. Now, he has provided him with some artifacts to help him along his journeys back to his father. They are pretty sure more is going on than just a standard illness. An illness like what is being described has been written down in a secret book in the magic community. And now he's going back to help and to check in on him and get some artifacts to help him along the way. One of those is going to help him to rune shift, which is basically like teleportation, but a little bit different. We also met a Monica, a love interest. Now, Monica is from a high class, highfalutin family, and they would frown down upon her interactions with such a lowly, menial person as Raylanu. Um, and so they they definitely have a thing for each other, but have not been able to act upon it. However, we also found that now he is a professor in his own right, which means he's a little bit higher up the scale than he was before. So now, that is where our quick recap brings us. Of course, it was 2 hours worth of reading. I recapped it in 3 minutes. Very different. If you missed the previous readings of the prologue, chapters 1 and chapters 2, they are available on the YouTube channel. They are available on Rumble for you to go and take a look at. I am Sir Arminius everywhere. That is the handle that I use across all of the different platforms. So you can either stop into one of those platforms and search Tellafrog. It should bring it up. Or you can always search Sir Arminius. It should bring you to my channel, and you can move along to listen to them. A couple of housekeeping reminders here. I record these chapters, which means that while I'm reading the individual chapters, I don't stop the narration to interact with the audience. It's not good for recorded audio to have all of that in there. So, I will interact with any comments that you would like to leave when I reach a stopping point in between chapters. All of the chapters that I will be recording tonight will be posted up to YouTube and Rumble after the stream this evening. Takes an hour, hour and a half to get them uploaded there because unfortunately my internet upload speeds are not the fastest in the world. But they're coming in to put in fiber optic soon, and so when they do that, I will have a much, much better upload speed. So, be a little patient. Tomorrow morning, go to look for them. They'll be there tonight, but tomorrow morning. We will welcome any comments that you may have. The author is here with us in the YouTube chat right now, so you are welcome to stop in, ask questions, comments. Feedback is always appreciated for anybody who is truly serious about improving their craft. So feel free to stop on in. You are welcome to interact with each other across the different platforms. I mentioned YouTube because I know it's an easy place I can just say to gather here. But we are on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, X, and Rumble. So wherever you happen to be, feel free to chat with each other. But the author is with me on YouTube. And now, sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy. If you happen to be somewhere hot, get yourself a cold drink. If you happen to be somewhere cold, get yourself a hot drink. Put your feet up, and let's enjoy as we continue our reading of Tellafrog, starting in Chapter 3. Rune shifting is a bit different from dislocation. We are taught in school that the rune shift is a tool passed down for a few thousand years. The number dates back as far as the academic literature discusses it. None can pinpoint the magic involved, who invented or discovered it, or why. In fact, the only speculation as to why such a thing would have been invented falls apart with people like me and Clement. We have lost our powers and can normally use them with limited success, and ordinary people cannot use them at all. Early chroniclers believed it was for non-magical kings to travel, but they were unable to substantiate this in their studies. Nowadays, their mention is but a brief paragraph in relics class. No one really cares about it in the magical world because they can easily dislocate anywhere, and it is used 1,000 times a day. They're quite lucky because in a split second they can go where they imagine as easily as walking through a shimmer wall. I always wondered why they were here among us at all. I guess it is no different than a poleaxe on display in a castle now. Once important, but now well, relic. I won't enjoy this. They warned it would take me time to recover. I sincerely hope it isn't a long delay to reach my parents. Thank you, Clement, very much for all of your help. Please tell Monica I will return as soon as possible, I said, reaching to shake his hand. Make sure you do, my friend. We care deeply for your parents and you, and we must know the cause of this. Farewell, he said. One deep breath, a glance up at McCord again, and I traced the rune as instructed. Oh, no, not like a shimmer wall at all. I felt as if all of my particles were sucked into a rune-shaped hole, all stretched and mashed with my sides scraping along the sharp stone edges I had just finished admiring. Quite nauseous as well. No, I don't like this one bit. It's also taking quite a long time. At least, that's what I perceive. I detect a storm. No, it is the storm from my childhood, from the trip on the sailing ship. It's below. I can see my father. That means up ahead should be the dragon. I can observe it clearly now, where it was hidden by rain at first, and I couldn't recall many details accurately. I am surveying the events of my dream, not re-experiencing them. It is an old dragon. Its scales thick and rough, its four horns curl around themselves, like perhaps an ibex, but also curved away from its head, more like a Jacob's sheep. The thick scales across the top of its head layer down the back of its long neck, and its ridged back spines poke from between the scales. They're green, but not mossy or plant-like, more like old copper. It is a copper dragon. Lightning rips around the clouds and then below us. Its underbelly is smaller, younger scaling, and is indeed copper. I feel myself tightening, starting at my feet. Pained releases of air escape my teeth as I grimace from the pain. My eyes tightly shut. I begin stretching again, but my head starts to feel the scraping like before. I must be coming through now. The scraping zips from head to toe, and I perceive a humming in my ears. Then I collapse onto what feels like stone. There, you shall be all right in a minute, or two. It was a familiar voice. Professor Templeton. Right, I am in London. I push him away gently, stumbling, and open my eyes enough to view my immediate surroundings. I spot a patch of grass. I think grass, and vomit a little on it. McCourt, is he? Right here. He is fine, Templeton said reassuringly. Not so happy I had the sauerkraut. Now, I look around and find myself in a small basement room that appears to be made of carved, solid sandstone. I lost the contents of my stomach onto what I thought was grass. It wasn't grass. It was straw. But, oh well, better than the professor's feet. Here, have some water to wash your mouth clean. He handed me a large glass mug, so I use it. How was it, considering? Awful, if I am to be honest. I hurt all over, almost as though I had been beaten with clubs through a keyhole by a dozen burly men. Only now did I think about the time that had passed since I tried rune shifting. It had been more than 10 years, and I swore it wasn't worth it to try again. I suppose it is true that physical pain doesn't linger in the mind or memory as long as the events that cause it. You have some bruising around your neck. We couldn't be sure if it would be discomforting, only that it would work. Feel up to heading to a place to lie down. I have a small room prepared for you through this basement door. You can rest as long as you need. I will bring some brandy, which should help you relax a bit. He helped me up from the rune wheel and through the door to the small rope bed with a goose feather mattress. I took another drink of the mug and leaned against the wall, groaning a bit. I will take McCourt up and let him out while you are resting. I will be right back. Templeton called my owl to his arm and took him up the creaky old stairs. Reclining, I started to feel better. I turned to look at the small table next to the bed, which genuinely did hurt, due to the bruising he spotted on my neck, most likely. There was a pitcher and basin, so I leaned over and poured some water into the basin and splashed it on my face a few times. The nausea did abate some. A few deep breaths, and I did it again. I wonder if all the stretching I felt made me taller. Don't be ridiculous. Still, I would take an inch or two without complaint. The stairs began creaking again, and the professor came down with a glass of brandy. Trusting his advice, I tried a sip, but liquor never agreed with me. Often the scent alone would make me ill. This did seem to help, though. Its warmth soothes my sore neck and settles the nervous tension throughout my body. I take it rune shifting was much different than dislocation. It sounds worse than I had hoped. Yes, sir, it was. I leaned back to the bed and the wall again. I told him what the experience was like and about the detail in which I was able to view the dragon from which I was injured that day so long ago. A copper dragon? Astonishing. I cannot say the last time one was spotted in the open, near so many ordinary people at that. He sat down in the chair at the table, adjusting his jacket tails from under his bottom and straightening his shirt as well. Templeton was wearing a nice camel-colored jacket and a black paisley silk vest with bright maroons and yellows. He was not wearing a tie. In fact, his top buttons were undone. I had never seen him relaxed, I guess. It may explain one part of the tale, though. The lightning which enveloped you, as you stated, could in fact have ricocheted off a copper dragon's scales, whereas another of the dragon family would have been fatally wounded. I suppose so. I have also brought you some of this powder from a tree bark, which was first brought back when your father visited the Brazilian rainforest. Concentrating on the appropriate compounds in the potions lab should also help alleviate some of the pain. Give it a try. He handed me a spoonful out of a jar, and I put it in my mouth. Another big drink of water, and it was down. I took another sip of the brandy. I remember the trip. In fact, it is the only dislocation I remember before the accident. I had my pet horny toad I had caught in Texas. I would hold him in my hand, slightly sideways, and rub his belly, and he would go to sleep. I had him with me for 2 years, night and day. When we went to Brazil, I made a small carrying box for him to stay safe while we were in the tent. I didn't want any animals to kill him or to lose him in a strange place. I stopped, remembering him and how much he meant to me, wincing before I finished telling the professor. When I woke up after our first night in the rainforest, Brazilian fire ants had gone into his box and killed him. There were hundreds all over him when I woke up. I felt terrible. I had done all I could do to care for him, but he had no defense against those ants he'd never lived with before. I am sorry to learn that, Relanu. I sincerely am, he said, looking down at his feet. A sorrowful wave of memories he must have had washed over him, shutting his eyes for an instant, turning his head slightly. Sometimes none of us survives being unprepared in unfamiliar environments, Professor. It was my fault for wanting to take him from his home. He trusted me, and I wanted my friend to join me on my adventure. I have been more cautious since then with such things, I explained. It is no reconciliation, but I recall your friendship with that little toad, as your parents relayed to me. That's when your mother began to call you her little frog. Surely you comprehend the connection now? She also feared for you each time you ventured forth into lands unknown to you, especially after you lost the magical abilities our kind has counted on for thousands of years to keep us safe. He sighed when done. Well, sir, I did have the advantage of being born a Texan. That makes me the toughest among wizard kind, does it not? I let a chuckle out. Laughing a bit to himself, Templeton agreed. I suppose so. Sir, does the old Norse cobbler still have a shop in the alley south of the Thames? I wondered. Indeed, he is my outfitter for each new climate I venture to. Why do you ask? He wondered. Well, it occurs to me now, knowing the violence and disruption the rune shift will cause, it is likely prudent to have a closer representation of local attire before I go. If I'm to travel 30 to 40 miles south after arriving in this manner, especially if I am unlucky enough to arrive on the rune wheel in a heap amongst ordinary folk, I should not also stand out in appearance. The professor began to nod a bit. Take my boots, if you will, please. Take my boots, if you will please, to him, and have some American-style boots made of brown leather, and an oilskin duster similar to the overcoats worn by Norwegian whalers in the North Sea. Only the coat, please. No liner, for God's sake. It's August. He should have one of those on hand, if I remember correctly. My shirt, deerskin waistcoat, and trousers should be acceptable as is. I reached into my coat pocket and opened the coin purse, and sure enough, discovered 10 full goldens. I handed the professor all 10, as I was hoping to have the items ready by morning so I could leave then. Excellent plan, my friend. I will go right away. Oh, when I was upstairs, Lady Laverne and your mother were waiting at their portraits for word of your arrival. I told them all had went well. Your mother said not to worry, all was in hand, and Artreus had arrived safely to assist. She will dispatch him to the rune wheel when you are ready, so you shouldn't be alone when you arrive. Slapping his knee and uncrossing his legs, he set off with my boots up the stairs. I slowly took off my coat, waistcoat, and trousers, leaving only my long shirt and long heels, as we call them back home, and climbed onto the thick mattress, pulling the heavy quilt over myself. I turned the lamp down, lifted the glass, and blew out the flame. I had to sleep. I slept until morning, and I could detect breakfast being cooked. Eggs and ham. Sounded like a cast-iron wood stove on the floor above. I sat up on the bed and put my feet down. The floor was chilly. I dressed except for my boots and poured myself a mug of water, which helped alleviate my dry mouth a bit. I picked up my rucksack and headed up the stairs, still quite sore and stiff. My neck turned a bit easier, but not much. At the top of the stairs, I went through the door and was, in fact, in the kitchen. Professor Templeton was at the table already eating. His housekeeper, Karina, was cooking at the wood stove in the corner by the window. Professor, I do not recognize this house. Where are we exactly? I asked, and carefully lowered myself into a chair across from him. No, you would not recognize it. It belongs to the university, serving as a temporary housing for traveling lecturers. I visited a guest speaker here almost 20 years ago, and she brought the runestone to my attention. Apparently, the university and the royal family came to an agreement several hundred years ago to grant ownership of the sites housing such relics, once the proof of indigenous language creation was out. He poured some goat milk into a small glass for me and continued eating his own breakfast. I see. The medicine you gave me last night must have worked, at least to some extent. Is there still bruising on my neck? I stretched my chin up so he could see better. No bruising, only some reddish streaks. That's quite good. Well, I feel as if the beating was a week ago, but better, I suppose. Karina set a plate down for me, with ham and eggs. I offered thanks and ate it swiftly. Manners were not important after I had detected good food nearby. My stomach had begun grumbling as I awoke and smelled the meal being prepared. Are we far from the cobbler's shop? I finished chewing and waited until both of us could speak. The habit some have of putting food in their mouth more energetically as they speak has always put me off. Manners or not, it seemed uncivilized. No, not far at all. We're in the Morden Place area, a few blocks from his workshop. He had the coat as you requested all ready for sale. He said you could have the boots ready by midday today, he said, finishing the last of his meal after answering me. Good. I feel I should go as soon as possible. I am not so diminished that I should not proceed as soon as then. Even if I leave then, it will be a 2-day ride once I arrive back in Texas, barring unforeseen troubles. I will have a courier pick them up and bring them here. It's 10 o'clock now. Why don't you rest in the sitting room after breakfast? In all likelihood, it will rain all day, he suggested. Sounds good to me, sir. Will any more of the medicine powder help, or does it last a few days? I asked, unconscious that I was holding my forehead at the same time. No, I am certain it only lasts a few hours. I will acquire some more, and a small vial you can take with you, since it will all begin again by tonight. He rose and went into his satchel to retrieve it, hanging on a hook by the kitchen door to the little back garden. Lilac, marigolds, blue days, and a few roses were visible, although due to the rain I couldn't smell them. The small herb pots on the windowsill, however, were filled with dill and oregano, and were some of my favorites. I thanked him again for the gift and the hearty breakfast and returned to bed, the need for rest and recuperation overtaking me once more. The sitting room had only a lounge seat, and I needed to lie down, so I went to the basement room again. Raylanu, wake up! It was the professor. It is almost 2 in the afternoon. Did you want to keep resting? I blinked hard 2 or 3 times and rubbed my eyes. No, thank you. I should be on my way. I sat up, got another drink of water from the pitcher, and exhaled heavily. Have you received the delivery of the clothes? I asked under my breath. Yes, it's here at the end of the bed. He reached for it. Wrapped in heavy brown paper and twine, I untied it and opened it. The boot bore a close resemblance to the Texan vaquero style, being plain with no unnecessary decorative stitching, no extra eyes, a good square toe, and a thick, layered suede and yew wood sole. It should work well enough in the saddle and against rattlesnakes. The oilskin overcoat was underneath the boots. It was a dark, rich brown with a shoulder cape and underarm straps, a tall collar, and deep outer pockets. Thankfully, it had no liner, which would be standard for European ship coats, because August in Texas is incredibly hot. Rolled up, it can make a great pillow when it's hot, and the oilskin will keep me dry in winter or summer. The cobbler said he cast a confusion charm on the shell of the coat. I am curious if it will work or not for you, since you can use some magical objects which are enchanted, he pointed out excitedly. Oh, one more thing. He had a hat that I remember you describing from home, and I can size it properly for you, if it's in fact not felt or woven straw. It is magically made. He used a real straw model, and laying it on his basement mushroom boxes, had these rawhide puffballs grow under a charm to shape around the hat. It is so light, as strong as formed rawhide, waterproof, yet naturally breathable. The only indicator of its non-standard manufacture is its dark olive brown color and texture. Apparently, it is quite the popular item among the upper magical classes to buy and display. Professor picked it up from behind himself and put it on his head as he turned around, grinning at how he imagined he looked in it. Now, that is a way of making a hat I did not think of, sir. Could I inspect it? I extended my hand towards him, and he dropped his smile and took the hat off. Actually, wait a moment. I do want to see it on myself. I will go upstairs for a moment, where there is a mirror. I'll be right back." He walked upstairs, letting himself grin again. At the top of the creaky stairs, his housekeeper let loose a loud psh sound before descending into hilarious laughter. "I'll have none of that, ma'am. This is a serious piece of kit for our guest." He dressed her down in his tone. To no avail. She kept laughing at him, and by the sound of it, slapping her leg over and over. The professor let a grunt out when he reached the mirror, and I could hear him walking back to the basement stairs. He paused at the top. "Corina, you were right. There is no hope for me in the unsettled lands. It was ridiculous." He came back downstairs, eyes on the floor, hat in hand, extended for me. I took the hat from him, for he was quite right about how he looked and about its unique fabrication. I could find no fault in the design or creation. I bent the brim quite harshly, and it popped back to its original form. "This is quite nice. Having your hat bent and losing its shape is the worst." I smiled and did it again. "Try it on so I can size it for you." I flipped it, held the brim with my right index finger and thumb, and my left fingers on the back. It was likely 2 sizes too large, not surprisingly. Most European men had more hair than I wear, and often their heads are a bit broader, especially at the front. Besides, if they only display them, sizing is not relevant. "Here, let me see it," he said, holding his hand out. He took the hat and pulled his wand from the wand sleeve inside his waistcoat. It was the same one I remembered from school, about 9 inches long, of twisted, light-grained wood, with a nickel handle. One circular motion with the wand pointed to the inside of the hatband, and it shrank a bit. He gave it back, and it was as close to perfect as possible. "It is perfect. Thank you for everything. I'm going to get dressed and head out. Is McCourt upstairs? Has he eaten and had a good drink?" "Yes, he was on the table eating a few bits of ham, and actually wanted some of my tea earlier." "Yeah, he can be quite a rascal sometimes. I'm glad he is full." "I was thinking about your room-shifting trip and the time you experienced. The vision and clarity you had." The professor took a seat at the end of the bed, put his left hand on his thigh and his right hand with the pointer finger extended. "When any of us travel across space as we do, it's postulated we are passing into the space between spaces, areas which are not accessible to us but are pervasive, all around us, and we can only pass through them. You having a clear vision of the memory may point to an old idea that the aether isn't only a place we can pass through, but a place where all our consciousness is also stored. Please record any or all of your experiences in these movements in your notes. They may need to be written in the book, as well as the results of your trip and the question of your father's illness." I nod my head as I finish dressing, looking down and to the left where the professor is, hoping I can help my family while trying to keep all this in there too. I pack the coat in my rucksack and pull on the boots. The old Norse cobbler nailed it. They fit like a glove, and even the spots in my old boots, which had rubbed initially but had been shaped over time, were soft and no trouble. One of the many benefits of magic craftsmanship. "Can you keep these other boots here? Take them home with you?" Holding them up to him. "Of course. Do you feel ready?" He took the old boots from the floor and set them on the bed beside him. "Yes, I need to go and get it over with. I hope that having a few hours from breakfast until now, I don't have the upset stomach problem again." I whistle for McCourt. He comes down the stairs and flies through this room into the one with the rune wheel, standing on the edge of it. He appeared to have no painful difficulties from the travel medium. That made one of us. We walk into the adjoining room as I put the rucksack on, and I take McCourt onto my arm and set him on my shoulder. "Thank you, Professor, for everything you have done to help me return home. I will do my best to keep everything in mind you and Clement have told me thus far." I nodded him and received a nod in return. I take a good long look at the rune wheel, trying to discern if any of the symbols matched the ones I saw back in Austria. Only one, an H with wavy sides. Sir, is this the one that would take me back to Austria? The one where I came from? No, I don't believe so. The compass watch Clement gave you should show you, though. Deciphering those is something we can work on together when you return, perhaps. Professor Templeton points to the rune I need. I can see where the drop of my blood is on this one. I look at him, nod, and trace my finger onto it. This time, it feels as though it's pulling me through the rune by my arm. And strangely, while stretching, I can tell my body is completely unnaturally bent for an instant. Next, I felt as if my mind was hovering around the rune wheel in Texas already, and I witnessed my body squirt out head first and end with my mind back where it belongs inside my skull, and I'm standing on the disc. Whew. My disorientation was less this time. I set McCord on the rune wheel and sat down, my legs dangling for a moment as the sun was much brighter here, and my eyes were adjusting slowly. Aside from tingling all along my right arm, I don't feel anything out of the ordinary. I look around since I am out in the open, early afternoon in Texas, and I don't spot Arterius about. The rune wheel was carved on an outcropping of bright white limestone near the end of a narrow mesa topped with mesquite trees, spotty broomwood, and bramble. I cannot detect any signs of settlement or trail nearby, and that's good. Grasshoppers, small birds, cicadas are all I can hear. Well, and the scurrying of the large red harvester ants, which only I can detect. My owl seemed to fare well again, but was a little fidgety, so I set McCord off to fly around. Yeah, it is hot up here. Not a cloud in the sky, and the distortion of heat is making anything in the distance appear to wiggle around. So, where would I be waiting for someone in this area? The rise I was standing on runs north-south, so I decided to head down the broken ledges of sandstone, which are interspersed in the limestone on the east side. In places, they seemed to be almost steps, but brittle enough that it wasn't worth the gamble to walk on. Working my way around the east side, being in the shade at this hour, is where I expected I could find him. As I arrive where shade falls far enough from the crest that I am out of the direct sun, I notice a small draw near the hill's base, and a stand of taller, greener mesquite and good growth of cattail grasses, which is a good sign of water. He is probably thereabouts, the horses having to drink quite a bit this time of year to stay fresh, and they can graze along its bank. It takes a good 30 minutes to make my way down, hearing and smelling horses several times on the way down. Ah, good. You have made it in one piece, I see. Arterius shouted from the shade. His accent was noticeable and heavy, and his pronunciation was crisp. Indeed I have. You are a wise man to stay here while you wait, as distances between safe and portable water are difficult to find with regularity around here. I pointed out. A few yards of loose rock still at a difficult slope later, and I made it down to where the ground leveled out. I spent the morning patrolling around, sir. I didn't detect any sign of others nearby. He was speaking loud enough for me to hear, as I was still picking my way through some prickly bush and making racket walking on the loose stone. I thought about going north into a small village I spotted, but not knowing the territory or whether they were friend or foe, I decided to wait here and speak to you first, he said calmly from his seat on an old cedar trunk under some bushes. Thank you, my good man. I was going to suggest that at least one of us be armed properly, even for a relatively short trip. I hope you don't mind my vernaculars beginning to slip back to territorial, especially in the company of others. It definitely keeps the ordinary folk at ease, I said as I made my way down the different ledges of the bank made by sudden rainstorms, which then dry just as fast. How far are we from the copper mine, do you know? I did fly around last night as the cover of dark would be good enough protection from curious observers. I believe it is only a mile north. I could be sure I saw its remnants of an open mind of awe from above before it descended into a mine entrance. There was no one around either that I observed, sir. I could detect his shape through the bushes and undergrowth. He had carved another piece of pork and ate it from the tip of his knife. Coming around the stand of bushes where he was, I could finally see him well. He was at least 6 feet tall, wearing tall black European riding boots, navy blue riding pants under cowhide chaps with patches of black, white, and brown, an Austrian officer's shirt, and a short riding coat. The chaps looked ridiculous, but he may have bought them to protect his pants and tall boots back in Austria, and the shopkeeper thought he was doing Arterius of service. I imagine there was quite a bit of fun poked at him after he left the outfitters. The chaps will help, regardless of the silly appearance, as hardly anything in Central and West Texas exists without thorns of some kind. He had brought with him 2 horses, which is a benefit of dislocation, well, for those who can do it. He can bring anything he is touching at the time he chooses to wherever he is going. They were fit, and by their appearance it seemed they were part of a group, perhaps having been brought from the Americas to Europe in recent months. It had become a big business in recent years, corralling wild mustangs in the American Southwest, shipping them to Europe and Australia to meet the needs of their growing armies. The saddles and hardware were obviously made in Austria and were practically new, but for our purposes, they would work well. Have you also flown our route? Are there any washouts or arroyos that may be difficult to ride through? I asked, untying my horse from the brush and walking it in front of him. Yes, sir. I believe if we stay in this valley, if you can call this a valley, more of a dip between some hills, we should be obscured for a couple of miles from either side. From there, he motioned in the direction he was speaking about with his knife. It is fairly open fields until dark. He stood, standing and brushing himself off, and walked to his horse. I smiled. He had done well on the reconnoiter. Well, fields imply cultivation. Out here, they simply call it a prairie. I smiled and said, Prairies are for riding across and for varmints to live in. Arterius nodded, and his head tilted side to side a bit in learning the distinction. How are my mother and father? I visited with them for about 30 minutes before I left this morning. Your father does not seem any worse than last night. Your mother is strong. She is extremely happy you are almost home. Thank you. I am glad they are all right for now. I stopped, checking the straps on the saddle, and turned to face him. I put my fists on my hips and glared at him. I shook my head side to side. He turned to look at me, nervous at my sudden serious face. What? What is it? Now, Arterius, if I may, you will have to trust me on this. I stopped and thought for a moment, for this had to be taken properly by someone from an aristocratic family. Perhaps leading by example will be more effective. So I stepped to where the little trickle of water is coming out of the ground, and take a couple of handfuls of mud and rub it all over my rolled-up shirt sleeve and arms. Its reddish clay content stains both my skin and sleeves. I rubbed more on my elbows, knees, and up and down the sides of my boots, and some onto my pants. I glanced up at Arterius, who was giving me a look between shock and disgusted indignation. I found a spot of blacker mud and added some of it on as well. What are you doing, sir? Arterius finally asked, his baffled expression revealing his uncertainty about whether he wanted to know the answer. Well, it is 300 miles in the shortest direction to a riverboat or seaport where we could have entered the country. Not many people know anything about my family or me at all. I knelt down to wash some of the residue off my hands, shook them off, and stood again, counting. Continuing. If we appear in the middle of central Texas as though we stepped out of a clothier in Paris, word of strange business will be in California by week's end. We either appear to belong in our surroundings, or those surroundings will attack and betray us. Please, sir, Soil yourself as though we have spent hundreds of miles traveling across hostile land in the oven of summer. It may save your life, I said, still applying dirt to the wet mud and rubbing handfuls of grass on my elbows and knees, using dry grass to scuff my boots and other leather to complete the view for others. Artyrus did so, but seemed pained, especially by the activity when he reached his high, spit-shined boots, as he presumably had spent time working on the expanse of leather himself at times. Anyone who has worked military leather of that size would suffer physical pain while destroying hours of diligent shine work. I advised him to completely remove the chaps, and perhaps we could trade those in the little village north of here for 2 pairs of older, well-worn ones more suited to our needs. The amount of sweat we both exuded, given the almost 100-degree temperature with thick, heavy humidity and nary a breeze, meant that as soon as we began our trip on horseback, the dust would cake in every fold of skin, completing our look as I wanted. The village was only 3 or 4 miles north of here, if I remember correctly. It was a small Weiko village, loosely affiliated with the Wichita tribe to the north. They were excellent farmers, traders, and hunters. Friendly to most, they made unique beehive-shaped huts, roofed with grass. Usually they had much to trade, including surpluses of buffalo and deer jerky, hides, and vegetables. Before I left for Europe, they had had some skirmishes with the Comanche, as well as with some tribes of Cherokee who had been moving further west as the Americans settled more and more of the land. I suspect that after the struggles with the Mexicans and Texians are mostly over, this group of native Texans will be an important part of the new nation. We need to head to the hill near the Brazos River, where the small village you spotted on your reconnaissance is located. They are the Veiko, and we can buy further provisions before heading to my family's home. Ready to leave? I said, while mounting the horse Artyrus had brought for me. Yes, sir. I would very much like to see it up close, he said, grabbing his bedroll, which he had been leaning against when I first arrived, tying it to the back of the saddle. We sent our owls off ahead of us, Artyrus ordering his, named Cat, short for Catherine, to return with any news of trouble. After passing out of the shade of the little mesa, the ground continued to slope downhill. It seemed, with the horizontal level of plain grasses lower than the perceived horizon. This time of year, the ground was hard, and although we were fairly near the Brazos, most of the grass was already yellow or outright brown, crunching as the horses walked across it. There were several deep gullies clogged with dry thorn vines and cactus, but not being certain of their actual path in relation to our destination, I decided we should stay on the path due north according to my compass. Using them as cover would be suitable if we were already being tracked or watched. Neither was true as far as I knew, and with Artyrus and my compass combined, with the charmed coat, I was hoping we would pass unobserved to our destination. It was only 2 hours, and I could see the rise which marked the outpost, on the south side of the Brazos. A distinct trail appeared now on our right, which in all likelihood followed the river. We were only a mile or so from the Waiko village. With the conflict over, I was hoping there might be a ranger station, or even a real trading post. Chapter 3 complete. For those of you guys listening, if my accent seemed to fumble a little bit back and forth at the beginning, you didn't hear anything. It's all confusion. I have so many different accents in my head that sometimes it takes my brain a moment to settle on the right one. It kept on trying to slip into French there. What are you gonna do? All right, so now our protagonist has made his way all the way from Austria to Texas in a short, probably 24 hours or less? Darn tootin'. Made his way to London first, made his way to Texas. So, very soon here we're going to be getting ourselves into a different accent, which he has already explained. that he will be taking on some of that local vernacular. Figure if he was born in Texas, he would speak with that, but his parents were probably originally from elsewhere, so and he spent his time in Austria, so we get to play with accents because I like to play with accents. It's fun. All right, everybody, if you are ready, I too am ready, and we will jump into Chapter 4. Approaching the crest of the rise, with pines, smaller oaks, and elms on the perimeter, an open plain of about 40 acres came into view. There was a new structure to the left, with a newly built palisade fence around it, about 8 feet tall. The building was constructed from low axe-hewn timber, featuring a wide porch and a wood plank roof covered in sod, with a small chimney located on the south end. The gates of the palisade stood wide open, giving a good view inside. Behind it was the natives' village, with distinctive beehive-shaped huts with bound grass exteriors. Within were 40 or 50 of those family homes, with racks made for stretching and curing deer and buffalo hides, and my nose could tell all were still done in the traditional way, with cooked brain and oak bark tannins, not the lecherous, hateful burning chemicals some in Europe had begun using. My sensitive nose despised that. Besides, while those tanning methods may last longer, the leather does not breathe naturally, and here in Texas, they would be usable only 2 months a year, lest you die of dehydration. By comparison, properly brain-tanned deerskin can be easily worn year-round, as long as a single thin layer of homespun cotton is the only underlayer. The Waiko were already in the last weeks of harvesting their crops of corn, squash, and beans. This was the first time I remember them growing tomatoes here. I can also smell a great quantity of muscadine grapes in the far stands of trees. Wild ones grow far up into trees, making them safe from foraging animals, but difficult to harvest compared to the meticulously maintained ancient vines of Europe. We dismounted and walked the horses to the rail and trough inside the little palisade. A man came walking out of the open door and sat in the rocking chair to the left, watching us. He wore a tall, crowned, light gray felt hat with a wide, round brim and rattlesnake and concho hatband. He had a roomy, natural-colored canvas shirt with a deerskin vest, most likely made here, in fact. His trousers were dark gray wool with properly designed vaquero boots, spurs still on, so he wasn't some former impresario used to sitting behind a desk. He had an apple in one hand and a small, wide-bladed skinning knife in the other. As I walked up to him, I observed that his thick mustache and unshaven whiskers were evenly matched with black and white. He looked up a bit, and the shadow of his hat lifted to reveal a man of Mexican origin. "Howdy, fellas," the man said, with no trace of Spanish predisposition in his voice. "What you need here?" His eyes darted back and forth quickly, surveying the two strangers. He set to peeling the apple, making a single, long, unbroken peel. "We were looking to pick up a few provisions if there are any here we could buy." I spoke plainly and politely, unsure of his title or purpose. "Well, what's your names?" he asked, almost finished with his apple peeling. "I am Randy Frog, and this is Art Metternich. I'm heading south. Got word my father isn't doing well. Got some kind of illness. All alone with my mama. I indeed was looking to buy a couple of pistols, maybe one of Patterson's revolver rifles, if you have any about." The man began nodding a little and cutting small wedges off his apple. "What is this place, anyhow?" "Frog, huh? Well, this here place is our little rangerin' post. Just built a couple of months back. Y'all lucky I'm here. We only use it to store things and stay in when we're in the area. My name's Antonio Flores. My cousin rode with Juan Sanguine. They brought me on here recent. Seems, Waiko Injuns here been having trouble with Comanches now and again. Plus, there's some groups of Cherokee moving through these parts, too, causing trouble off and on. One of them groups attacked a supply cart bringing in supplies, and we managed to run 'em off." Antonio looked up at us, squinting so much that his mouth opened slightly, revealing why the apple slices were so small. He had only one top tooth, I could see. After a short pause, he went back to his apple and continued. "The owners planned on setting up shop hereabouts, and had a mess of them Pattersons. Rangers bought all they could afford, but seems the 36 caliber ball these are chambered in ain't all that popular elsewhere. I was told we can sell them here to settlers, but none on credit. You got money? I can sell you what you need." "We do. They're Australian guildings, but gold is gold. We need a rifle and a pistol each, plus shot, powder, and molds if you have 'em," I said. "Gold is gold, Mr. Frog, that is true." He let a long, slow nod go. "Come on in," he said, waving his knife toward the doorway, then cutting his apple into slices. We walked into the door, and with the depth of the porch, even with the 2 windows uncurtained, it was quite dark. Inside was a desk and chair to the left in front of one of the windows, and stacked all around the walls were crates and barrels. Mr. Flores stood and followed us inside, chomping his apple as he brushed past us, and went to a single crate on the floor at the back with no lid, and straw sticking out of it. "There they are. Let me see your gherkins or whatever first," he said, spitting seeds on the floor. I reached inside my vest and pulled out the coin purse Clement had given me. I pulled out 5 guldens for him to view. He held out his hand, and after receiving all 5, he closed his hand and shook it up and down a bit, likely judging the weight with one eye closed and one-sided frown. No doubt his concentrating face. "All right, that's enough for a rifle and pistol and whatnot each, I reckon." He shoved another whole slice in his mouth and pocketed the gold. "They're all new ones, but most of the packing was busted up getting here when the wagon wheel fell in a gopher tunnel on the side of a hill, and they all fell out on the ground. We packed 'em up with straw after that." We shook a rifle and a pistol from the straw and ensured that the actions and disassembly for reloading were functioning properly. Looking around, I asked if he had any leatherworks, holsters and belts and chaps in the little storeroom. "Yeah, them Injuns trade us stuff they make all the time. We got a load of belt buckles in last month. They made some good rigs for all of us using them Pattersons, too. They're up here hanging on the wall." I turned back towards the front of the small room and found a dozen or more new ones, made specifically for these revolvers, hanging on a series of pegs driven into the wall. "Did the payment cover those, too?" I asked. "Reckon so. Not many people using these Pattersons. They're about the only ones fitting those. Go ahead. There's a stack of leather pants, shirts, chaps, bedroll covers, and such out back on a bench. Give me another 2 of them little bars you got, and y'all can pick out what you want from the stack." He finished his apple in one big mouthful, crunching it as he spoke. We went out the front door and around back to a long, foot-wide bench made of a half-log piled high with leather goods. After a few minutes, we each had a fringed pullover shirt made of deerskin and chaps, so we returned inside to show Mr. Flores and ensure he was agreeable with the arrangement. He was sitting behind the desk, making a note in a ledger, I assume, about our transaction. "That's fine, Mr. Frog. Now I gotta say, there's a troublesome band of Comanches around bouts who are convinced there's some evil at work, and it's to blame for their misfortunes. I'd recommend you get to your folks and keep 'em safe sooner rather than later. In fact, about everyone round here is still riled up about one thing or another. Y'all keep safe," he said, starting on another apple, this time a Granny Smith green. "Yes, sir, and you with your rangerin'. For what it's worth, these Waiko have always been good people. I'm glad to see you keeping a post here," I said as we turned to walk out. "Yes, sir, they are. Be seeing you fellas." He never looked up from his peeling as though he was involved in a world record apple peeling length contest. We left after loading our pistols and ensuring the primer caps were set securely on the rifles as well. Artiers had taken off his Austrian jacket and left only his shirt on under his new buckskin blouse. Once we passed the edge of the hill and began back towards the path home, I caught him looking down at his garb and giving a silent little head-shaking laugh. "What is it, Atreus, which you find amusing?" I needed to know. "After seeing my first American village and indigenous settlement, I would have clearly been an eyesore, which caused trouble. But this, what I have on now, is comical and contrary to everything I have ever seen, I must say." He giggled a little, still shaking his head. "Comical, maybe, but it can save your life. And, Artyrus, this is not America. This is Texas," I clarified, looking straight ahead, chin up. "It certainly is, sir," he agreed. It stood separate from anything he'd heard about the American cities, for sure. Once we reached the point where I arrived on the rune wheel earlier, I subordinated myself to him. I let him lead, as he had scouted it, and the bank along this tiny stream was packed with all manner of prickly things, not wide enough for two abreast riding. The horses were excellent. His was a tall, stout, tan buckskin with a dark brown nose. Mine, a palomino, not quite as many hands tall, but the one I would have chosen had I been the buyer. She's a well-tempered mare, smart, but not independent enough I should worry about her being startled easily. The saddle and bags were well worn, but all the tack and hardware were well oiled, soaped, and cared for. The butt of the Patterson revolver rifle was also worn, so it may have been one that hit the ground when the crates were broken open. Its scabbard was fringed and the leather tooling looked new, though metal stitching tools were used. On the right side of the saddle, the pistol's holster was affixed to the saddle straps. We followed the meandering trickle of a creek mostly south, turning now and again west a bit before returning southerly. Some of the landscape started to feel familiar when we would each take a side of the hills on either bank to check for activity near us. The last time we edged up to look, the draw was pointing west, so we both went up the south side. Peeking over, we observed that it was pretty flat, and so we dismounted and shuffled up the loose dirt edges to poke our heads through the grasses and take a look. It should not be far to the stretch of trees, which would take us near a little stream called Julia Creek, along which is a good stand of cottonwood trees we can stay in for the night, with higher spots on 3 sides. I checked all around, and short of coyote scat and some groundhogs milling around, I couldn't perceive anything of note. We came up out of the little trickle dip we'd been following and cantered down due south as the sun softened near the horizon to our right. Not half an hour later, we entered the mesquites and scruffy cedars we had seen earlier, which gave way to a tall growth of white pines. A bit further, and the land sloped down to the Julia. I definitely began to recognize the trees, rocks, soils, fragrances, and the appearance of this little area. "This way is a little bend in the creek with good visibility where we can stop for the night." I led us off to the right a bit, and came to it. It was flat and covered in a thick mat of pine needles, just like I remembered as a boy. It may have been used before. There were a few 2-foot diameter pine logs, around 8 feet long, around the perimeter, perhaps for sitting on at one time. I walked to the far side and tied the horse to the tree by the creek with enough rope so she could drink easily. Approaching the center of the clearing, I moved some of the pine needles around, and sure enough, I found a small ring of rocks. I used my foot to clear the dry pine needles out of the fire pit, while Artyrus tied his horse to another tree so it could drink and reach some of the edge grasses. I took the saddle off, laid it across a log I intended to sleep near, and then brushed more of the debris away from the fire area, kicking most over to where I would sleep. The few dry pine branches lying around I piled into the fire pit in a teepee shape. Would you mind, "Certainly." Artyrus pulled his wand and cast a small firebolt into the fire pit, getting it started. Then he cast a few protection, waved a light circle above his head, and presto! A cooking pot and stand were over the fire. A table with chairs set for us. Another 2 taps on the table, and a hen prepared for the spike. a pitcher of honey ale to drink, and a pile of biscuits and corn on the cob with butter. A ring of three like-new oil lamps, levitating around the table, lit it quite well. Honestly, the satisfaction of doing all this for myself will never really square with basically wishing things like this into existence. Many find that the magic that ensures long, healthy lives is a gift that sets them apart, making them above the ordinary. I always wondered if it was a way of ensuring that wonder would always exist in the world. But I understand why we had to hide, I guess. The suffering in the ordinary world for food and shelter is so pervasive that even if every wizard spent their lives conjuring food and water for the rest of the world, they would never sleep, and the number of sufferers would never be quenched. There are simply not enough magical people to conceive of trying it. We, or rather they, constitute less than half of 1% of the world's population, by the best estimates. Everyone who received the help would expect it, then demand it, and those who couldn't have it would, in all likelihood, make war on the others. That is the rationale I have heard my whole life, anyway. Thank you. I often forget how easy it is. I do appreciate when I can be a part of it, I said gratefully. I speared the hen and put it on the rack and sat down, pouring a glass of the ale. Ah, very good. So, Relanu, he started. Actually, Atreus, the papers I was given by the professor have me listed as Randall Frog to appear more American for our investigation. Not a bad idea, I suppose. My mother called me her little frog as a boy. Ah, Rendell. Or Randy? He queried. Randy, I guess, at least around strangers. How did you come to have the name Relanu? My father had a friend he served with in the last Wizard War named Raylanu. Raylanu Evanskew, I believe. He saved my father's life on more than one occasion. He was from Bucharest on the shore of Lacul Mori. They were going to visit each other's homes and families, but he passed away before the end of the war. One day I will visit there, find, meet, and thank them, I explained. Shaking his head in agreement, he asked, And my uncle, how did you meet him? He was the only one who lost some magic from an illness that anyone had ever met. The further back in history they looked, the more they couldn't find one like it. After he graduated, he was allowed to work as an ambassador to the non-magical world. However, in his available time, he worked with the schools of Europe to try to establish a better diagnostic set of tools and training for people like him, especially if they were children. As it turned out, I was the only one who had their loss of natural causes. There were others, but their losses came at the hands of magical curses, diabolical actions, and known causes. The professors let us proceed through school, though, testing all parameters to determine what, if any, magic remained. If any abilities lingered, they could try and build on them. I knew, though, I would have none. Wanting to be able to at least identify magic, rare animals, and herbs, and operate at least competently in both worlds, I did my best. My uncle, he began, adjusting his weight, was completely distraught after his loss of power. He spent virtually a whole year in a hunting lodge of the royal family, barely speaking to anyone. We were all worried. I was only 5 at the time, and I remember him being so happy and playful with all of the little ones. I recall that as a young boy, I didn't understand why he fell into this melancholy. He had used the magic for only a couple of years fully, and was quite good. But as unnerving as the illness was for him, we were all relieved he survived it. As a little boy, I was glad I still had my uncle. He told us that at the end of the year, he started praying regularly. Not for his magic to return, he knew it was gone, but instead for the wisdom to comprehend what it was God may have in store for him. That, perhaps, is the loss of magic was for a greater purpose. As years passed, when he worked with a few professors who had agreed to help and study the extremely rare cases like his, and later yours, He became quite excited at the hard work you did, surrounded by those who were still gifted with magic. He saw those with magic as benefactors as of a gift. I suppose he is right. My father, who is his brother, would not allow the house help to do tasks for us, as they determined we should learn to manage on our own. For example, at the age of 10, he ordered the stable workers to stop caring for my horse. I had to shovel and restore his stall every day. I had to fill his oat bin with a shovel and a handcart. I had to brush him and do all the work a farrier would normally do to care for him. I had to fill his water trough with a bucket from the stream, rather than using the hand pump in the barn. By the time I was 12, he had me spend a whole month at the tuck shop in town to help build a saddle. Start to finish. I began to love the work, and the lessons you learn on your own more than those taught to you by another. The hen should be about done. Leaning forward, I cut into it a bit, and it was. I pushed it off the spike with a fork and onto a plate. Is that why we must cook the bird instead of it being ready when you conjure it? Yes, I find they are better cooked to taste than simply conjured, he said as he came to the table. We dined, and I went to lie down on the pine needle pad I made, laying the overcoat on it. I took off my jacket and rolled it for a pillow, as it was still quite warm, even though the sun had been gone for about an hour now. Throughout the night I detected the presence of coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, skunks, gophers, and several frogs and toads. I also heard tunneling crawdads working in the creek and 2 king snakes. The charms must have included animal life as well. None, except the crawdads, were closer than 100 yards, and their sounds were almost inaudible to me. Arteris shook his wand once at the table, and it all vanished. A few embers from the fire danced away from it, drawn to the vacuum where the table had been. Another waved towards the log opposite the fire from me, and a quite comfortable cot with nice bedding appeared, under a small canvas shroud striped in his family's crest colors. He then also lay down. By midnight, the sounds that used to comfort me here had kept waking me up, just the ones from inside our protective bubble. I heard some moss on a rock at the creek and plugged my ears. I found some moss on a rock at the creek and plugged my ears. It helped a little. All I was hearing now was the white threads of nearby mushrooms spreading under the carpet droppings of the trees. I found it soothing. Growling and cooing woke me. McCourt was on the ground near my head with a mouse in front of him, and I could smell food cooking, and nasty boiled trail coffee. Not the Turkish coffee I had forgotten to pack. There was still a bit of low-lying mist around us. The burnt orange sun was not yet in our little depression of trees. Everything of mine, anyway, was damp. I sat up and looked around. Arteris was already up, frying bacon and eggs, his things all ready to leave, the table set. Cavalry captain indeed. Good morning, I said as I stood, shook off my coat and duster, and began rolling up the overcoat. Morning, sir. I rose at the darkest hour and took a quick look ahead to verify our route. It is a gently rolling, prairie, with one stream bed that we cross, which has run dry. We should arrive at Vunvel prison by mid-afternoon. I caught sight of some Comanche braves riding away from our pass. I don't think they had any notion of us. There were some other riders fumbling around us about 4 miles east, perhaps trying to pursue the Comanche. Arteris said as he finished at the fire and slid the meal onto the plates. It smells fantastic. Thank you again, as I pulled the seat out and sat down. I do not want to stop until we reach home, if that is all right. I agree. We need to quicken the pace to begin this inquiry, he agreed. We finished eating, saddled the horses, and checked our equipment, tying it again. He then pointed his wand at the area in a small circle, and everything returned to its original condition. I made sure to wind the watch, providing what protection it could for travel, and we mounted up. We crossed the stream, through the small wood, and up the rise to where the plain opened up. It appeared downhill from here for a long way. not something I remembered as a child when I had been here before. Knowing the tendency of my mind to wander in my youth, ground squirrels, javelinas, and grass spiders probably distracted me from my concerns about topography. Still, good news if it held. We alternated between short runs and quick trotting, depending on the ground and whether we were on top of a rise or not, trying to limit our outline to anyone in the distance. We were lucky, and the rest of the ride passed uneventfully. When I spotted the low depression with some outcroppings of rock that marked the boundary of my family's homestead, I pulled my pocket watch out and checked the time. About a quarter after 3 o'clock. As we reached and crested over the little craggy rise, I felt the disorientation of the shimmer wall. Then we wound down about 60 feet in elevation to the depression, which was home to a stand of cedar and some live and post oaks with low, long limbs, having been lashed by wind and ice storms when they try every year to venture over the edge of the depression. Once at the bottom, we wound our way through the trees and came to the tall slabs of iron ore and sandstone mix, which formed the maze in which Wormwell was placed. They were between 6 and 10 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet thick, with a reddish rusty color, and I could tell Artyrus was able to read the magical glyphs that marked the path, as he was making all the right turns without asking for my guidance. Mine was from memory now, as seeing those marks was impossible for me. I recall most of them from my youth, but not all of them. The area the homestead covered was 12 to 15 acres. Most of the rock slabs were covered in sharp edges, and I recall being cut quite often as a boy while horsing around them. The maze opened to a clearing, my home for so many years. It was the same beautiful log home, built for the previous warden, who served at the prison for the first 3 years after it was built, before he retired. It was better than new when my father assumed the duties of warden. It was worn smooth in the places where you put your hands and had additions like the small vegetable garden off to the left, featuring tomatoes, jalapenos, potatoes, corn, okra, and yellow crookneck squash. In boxes along the railing of the front porch, the only area open to the southern sun year-round, small herbs were planted. The round river rock chimney on the front of the house, with a small open hearth on the outside, had smoke lazily wandering up through the treetops. The split plank roofing had the same moss and lichen I remembered, only thicker and more widespread. The home was 2 stories tall, yet still nestled below the canopy of the trees. The horse stalls were to the far left, facing the open front yard. We passed through the split rail fence surrounding the yard, which reached from standing stone to standing stone. The bedsheets and laundry fluttering out back, I can hear on the clothesline. The lye soap rinsed free, but I could still sense it. I came off the saddle, landing with a little bounce and a smile bigger than that. I led the horse and Artyrus to the stalls and took the saddle off. Mother had already filled the rail bin with alfalfa hay and the bucket with cool, clear water for both horses. If Father's resting, I don't want to wake him, so I say we should proceed quietly. We both try to knock as much trail dust off ourselves as we can. Art's bowler cap not as effective as my nice proper hat. Far to the right, between an arch of the natural stone formations, is an iron cage with inscriptions all over it. A large lock housing behind it. About 20 feet through the natural rock tunnel, the door to the actual prison was located. "Is that the prison over there?" He pointed to it, having followed my glance at it. "Yes, that's Wormwell," I said. The steps to the porch were the same, half logs all of 12 feet long, leading up to the 4 steps to the porch. The porch was 10 feet deep and allowed for resting in the shade to cool off, which is needed about 10 months of the year here. Mother's old tabby cat was curled up in the rocking chair to the right of the door, not bothering to notice my coming home for the first time in 3 years. I honestly don't care for cats as pets. They're furry, meddlesome, and as likely to pee in your boots as care if you were on fire. As a familiar to magical people, I suppose, they are more useful than a mouser on a farm. I went to the front door, a row of heavy cedar planks held together with mortise and tenon joints and peg locks, hung from ornate wrought iron strap hinges. The handle is a simple sliding plank with with a peg on both sides. I open it quietly, and before I can step inside, my mother ambushes me with a great, crushing hug. I return the hug for a moment, knowing her scent since before I was born. "Oh, son, I am so pleased that you and the professor were able to find a way for you to travel so quickly. Please, please, both of you come in." Mamma was happy. She let go, briefly waving her hands for us to come in from outside, and hustled around us to shut the door. "Mamma, is father asleep? Oh, can I go look in on him?" I got right to it. "Yes, he is asleep now. None of the things we could normally use seem to stop the pain, the coughing, or the problem." "The problem?" I asked. "Yes, yes, I will explain. Please, come sit down at the table. I know the request for some secrecy has made this hard for all of us, but I suppose I understand as well. The professor has sent everything he could think of to help. Lord, sometimes I find a minute to rest here in the middle of the night, and his portrait starts rattling off another list of ingredients I should try. I know he is trying to help, but the time difference is not helping me relax one bit." Mamma rattled off, getting things ready for dinner and mixing something in a pitcher. We sat at the long table, with benches for seats, the same one that's always been here. As a young'un, I had to put two-inch thick slices from a tree trunk under myself to eat properly. Upon examining the area, it appears to be similar. Father's high-backed chair still near the fireplace, his bookshelf in arm's reach. His pipe was on the table next to it. I hear him cough. Mother reaches across the table and puts her hand on mine, cocking her head to listen. It only lasts a minute. "He's still asleep," she says, taking her hand back. "Oh, would you two like some cool lemonade? I made some this morning, and it seems the darn tree's lemons wouldn't ever ripen this year." She jumped up, went to the kitchen, brought back the glasses and pitcher, filled them, and with a tap of her wand, they became frosty with ice slush in them. "Never had any, madam. Please," Atreus said, reaching for his glass. "Oh, my, that is very refreshing," making the face of everyone who tries good lemonade for the first time. I waited for him to detect Mama's secret ingredient, a 1 to 4 ratio of Persian limes to lemons. It showed in the grimace a moment later. "Darling," Mother began, "Arteus came yesterday and early this morning to check on us. Even knew a charm or two we didn't, and he double-checked everything so we'd be safe." "It was my pleasure, my lady." He nodded and went back to the lemonade, taking more and letting the limes force another brief anguished look, then a smile, and another sip. "Mother, please tell me, when and how did this begin with father?" "It was, well, honestly, in June, over a month ago. One day, after completing his morning rounds in the prison, he sat down to write his reports. After a few minutes, he dropped his quill and said his left hand was hurting." She waved her hands, wrists down, something she would do in frustration at me and father. "That night, after he escorted the priest to visit the few prisoners who wanted to meet with him, one of his fingernails on his left hand was blackened. The next morning, two were black, and by the end of the week, all were." She stopped and covered her mouth with her hand, eyebrows inched further down at the corners. "At first, we thought it was a fungus or some slime mold, but after 10 days, he couldn't use his hand at all. Well, you know your father. He didn't want to bother anyone. Remember when you were a boy, he had a spot on his shin that was kinda dark and grew? That was just a spider bite. By the time he let me examine it, it was about 2 inches in diameter. A simple portion of cantaloupe rind fixed it overnight." Mamma had said more in the last few minutes than I usually would hear out of her in a month. Her frantic tone worried me. "So, after 10 days, that's when he first spoke with the professor, and since then we have tried everything. Finally, I said I'd had enough, and we had to let you know. The professor agreed. Since then, A dark line under the surface of the skin has proceeded up the arm, down his side, and to his foot as well. He cannot move that foot now. Of the original line, a branch started across his chest, and that's when the coughing began. The only thing that has marginally helped is the honey I give him in his hot tea. The honey made from the blooming jalapenos I grow up back, you know. She sighed and pushed her hands out of the table, exasperated. I am sorry he persuaded you to wait. They are concerned that it might be a dark or possibly ancient magic, which should be investigated. Do you think I could look in on him? I asked. Yes, please do, as quietly as you can. He has only been asleep for a couple of hours now. I would be happy to entertain Arcturus for a few minutes. She smiled. I took another drink of the lemonade and stood up, stepping over the bench. I walked through the sitting area, to the back, and up the stairs, being cautious not to squeak on the stairs, gripping the railing tightly. At the top of the stairs sat my old toy box, my stuffed Pegasus still on top. I turned left and, seeing that Mother was watching, nodded that I should go ahead. I went on and opened his door slowly. He was lying on his side, facing away, so I went to his bed. His right arm was out of the blanket, and he wore his short-sleeved summer sleeping gown. All of his fingers were black. His hand mostly black around the veins, and ashy gray in the rest. The line wound its way up the arm into the sleeve. His breath was shallow and raspy, sounding anything but healthy. I closed my eyes and said a quick prayer for him. A better father I couldn't imagine. Always time to play after duties. Always supportive of dreams, but never allowing chores to be slackened. I never had to wonder whether he was proud of me. He said so every chance he could. I left the room, upset that we didn't know how to help. Magical people often don't fully recover with time. Their bodies either prevent this kind of crippling disease outright, or spellcraft and potions eliminate it swiftly. We will figure this out, Dad. Hang in there, I barely whispered. I went back downstairs and sat with Mother and Arcturus again, refilling my glass. Is it as bad as we thought? Arcturus asked. Yes, I'm afraid so. It's on his right arm as well, I stated determinedly. Would it be possible to go into the prison to have a look around? Oh, yes. I have the report he filed on the day's work when it started. Not one prisoner has come or gone from their cells since that day. Everything is as it was, she said. Arcturus, you will have to accompany me, as use of magic and perception of magical misuse will fall to you, I said. Yes, indeed. My uncle made sure I had this to help. He pulled a beveled glass monocle from his pocket. It is a goblin-crafted crystal, the same kind they use when appraising goods for their magical heritage. It can determine the type or family of spells and enchantments on objects while using it. We cannot perceive such details with it, but it does show traces of magic, in gradients of white to black depending on strengths. Looking at the 12 or so bevels making up the lens, you will definitely have to use it. Looking through it might make me ill, I said. Mother went to Father's desk and retrieved the papers that made up the day's report, handing them to me. He went back through every step he made that morning. Morning, afternoon, the third day after it started. There were only 8 prisoners, most of whom have been here for over a year. He could not find anything out of place. Maybe the monocle will help, she said. Thank you. Anything else we should know? I kept shuffling through the papers, looking for anything of note. Father was a great note-taker. Ah, yes, there is a shapeshifter, a skinwalker shaman who was committed to guarding the prison for 2 years now. He stays inside and patrols around the halls. Mama rose to collect things from the kitchen. Take him this for his dinner. He can eat a bit earlier today than usual. He is forever in the form of a grey wolf. His name is Bandos. His family was killed by one of the prisoners. Bandos captured and delivered him here himself. She handed me a whole cooked rabbit and retrieved the pitcher of lemonade. This is for him as well. He loves it. He can understand everything we say, but will only be able to speak to Arcturus. He said he hasn't seen anything out of the ordinary. She went to the central log post in the center of the house. The post went through the front balcony of the second floor to the main roof beam. Here are the keys. The large square-shafted one is for the main gate. The other is for the entrance door. The cell keys are bound to your father. No one else can use them, but the main gate key will work. I will tell Bandos you are coming in so he doesn't attack you. That's a good idea, I said with a chuckle. Mother went to the central log post in the front room, supporting a main beam for the second floor and roof beams. On it was a silver plaque with a trumpet flower-shaped copper horn. It was on the back of the post, as viewed from the front door, and I hadn't detected it until she went to it. She spoke into it. Bandos, our son and a friend are coming in to look around, to see if they can find anything which could have hurt John. Please be kind and show them around. The voice had a distant echo to it. That wasn't there when I left. What is it? I asked. No. When Bando said he had bound himself to guard the prisoner, John crafted this, and the identical ones you'll find in the prison. It lets us talk to him and each other any time we want, she explained. That's Dad, all right. No problem he can't overcome with his mind and a little elbow grease, I said, shaking my head. As with most people who choose to live on the frontiers or unsettled land, they often create, out of necessity, tools, techniques, or gadgets to suit a need, with no regard to whether the rest of the world could benefit from it. Often these inventions predate the commercially available ones by many years. All right, Mother, thank you. We won't be long. I carried the meal and a drink for Bandos, and let Arcturus lead with the keys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Well, hello, Mr. Ryan Elliott. Thank you for joining in. Looks like we've had a couple of people here for our reading of Tellafrog. No, this is not my normal accent. This is my normal accent. But you know, if you're having so much fun with accents today, you never know what you're gonna get. Right, that is exactly what we are thinking about when we bring the written word to life. All right, everyone, hour and a half in, 2 chapters down, which means we are done for the evening. So I will be back. The plan is for this weekend. Ideally Saturday, could be Sunday. I will post something up on my normal places. You are very welcome, Mr. Torin MacRath. So I will let you guys know, at least on X, and I will also post up on YouTube if I'm going to do this Sunday. I'm part of a competition team in MechWarrior Online right now, and oftentimes our matches are happening Saturdays at 8, when I would normally be reading this to you. So if that's the case, then I'll move it to Sunday. If not, I'll have it on Saturday. But I will post up on YouTube one way or another as soon as I know for sure, as well as anybody who happens to be on X, I will be posting about it there as well. If you missed any of the chapters this evening, chapters 4 and 5 will be up on YouTube and Rumble a little bit later this evening, and chapters 1, 2, and the prologue are all available now if you missed them. As always, make sure you get out there and support the author. You can pick up his book on Amazon, and if you happen to be a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, why haven't you picked it up already? It's free on Kindle Unlimited. You can page along these pages with me, and guess what? He gets paid for it. Did you know that's how Kindle Unlimited works? For those of you guys who didn't know, the more pages you read of a Kindle Unlimited book, the more the author gets paid. We like it when the author gets paid. If you're enjoying the reading here, make sure you do stop out there to give him support. When we are all said and done, I know I will be writing a review about the book. I hope you guys will consider and thinking about doing the same. And if you are enjoying the story, then book 2 is out and available. Now, if you buy book 1 and finish reading it and go get book 2, great. If you wait for me to finish reading this one to you and then you go get book 2, also great. Just make sure you continue to support them. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you have yourselves a wonderful week ahead. I will be back on Thursday for some MechWarrior Online and Battletech reading, but that's not this, so I understand if you don't make it for that one. But you are always welcome. You can find me on any of my platforms. That is YouTube, Twitch, Kick, X, Rumble. And well, at least these readings I read on X as well. I don't do the MechWarrior Online on X. It still sounds weird calling it X. Twitter. We is all on the Twitter. You guys have a wonderful week ahead. Just remember, the greatest gift that you can give me is a gift of your time. And I appreciate that you guys gave me the gift of yours this evening, whether it was for 5 minutes or the whole read. If you have not already, make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. Give likes. Subscribing is free. Liking videos, commenting, that only takes a moment of your time, but it helps the algorithm make sure more people can find these wonderful readings and discover new indie authors. You'll find in my live reading list there are a lot of indie authors that I have read and more to come. Have a great week ahead, everybody. I will see you guys again very soon. Good night, all.